Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wrestling with a question that I think defines so many creative careers, living from your work.
Right.
Is it a real possibility, or is it, for most people, just a myth? But we're going to approach this very specifically. This isn't about whether you're talented enough or dedicated enough. We're framing income as uh, a structural reality, not some kind of moral test.
And that's really the mission for you, the listener. We have to get past this weird cultural taboo around talking about money in creative fields and just look at the mechanics of it all.
Yeah, how does it actually work?
Exactly. How do you keep the lights on? It's not about the total in the bank account on one specific day. And to get that clarity, we've pulled together some really interesting sources.
So what are we working with?
Okay, first up, we have this really crucial reflection on the economics of being an artist. It gets into things like precarity, value, when you get paid. It sort of sets the stage.
Our framework.
Our framework, exactly. But to ground all that theory, we're also diving into the actual career of a multidisciplinary artist, Roos van der Jagt. She also goes by D-O-B-O-L-I-O Roos.
And for her, we have a full CV, right? Decades of work listed out.
Yeah.
And also a press kit for a podcast she made. Why that combination?
Because that's the evidence. The CV gives you the data points, you know?
Yeah.
You can see what years of persistence actually look like on paper.
It's a record.
It's a record of negotiation, of these huge high-prestige moments, but also the constant grind just to keep going. Our first source argues that to survive as an artist, you need skills that have, well, shockingly little to do with actually making art.
And that's what we want to get clarity on, those structural constraints.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with what feels like the central problem, the core contradiction. Our sources say that artists are basically asked to hold two opposing expectations in their heads at all times.
It's a total tightrope walk. The first source just nails these tensions perfectly. You're expected to be professional, meet your deadlines, be organized, but you absolutely cannot appear to be commercial or, too driven by the market.
That's the sellout fear. It's this idea that if your work actually sells or gets popular, its cultural value is somehow diminished. It's like the system punishes financial success if it happens outside of its very narrow channels.
And that flows right into this second paradox. You have to be ambitious, go for the big grants, the major exhibitions, all of it. But you have to pretend you're not motivated by money.
You can't say, I need this grant to pay my rent.
Never. That's viewed with suspicion. The whole sector runs on this idea of passion, which, then becomes the justification for underpaying people.
And then there's the third one, which might be the most damaging. You have to show this complete, unending dedication, sacrificing everything for your craft. But at the same time, you have to be endlessly flexible and just accept a total lack of stability.
And that is precarity. Normalized. That's the definition. Artists are, they're the original gig workers, pouring all this energy into a system that pays them in prestige for being unstable.
And the institutions, the galleries, the nonprofits, they need that.
They depend on it. That flexible, dedicated labor is what makes the whole cultural infrastructure run so cheaply.
This all leads directly to this silence around money. Why is it such a taboo? If everyone's in this precarious boat, why is talking about it treated like a personal failure?
What's fascinating here is how that silence is actually a mechanism of control. It benefits the system way more than the individual. The source points out that the sector would much rather talk in these lofty ideals.
Cultural value, social critique.
Exactly. Anything but actual numbers.
It feels like talking about money would break the spell.
It does, because when the financial reality is just this vague, unspoken thing, it normalizes working for exposure. It normalizes taking on these huge projects that are severely underpaid.
Because you assume everyone else is doing it too.
And no one challenges the structural gaps, like grants that don't cover your overhead or exhibition fees that don't even cover the time it takes to install the work. The low-pay status quo holds because it's cheap.
So the answer isn't necessarily demanding a salary, but demanding clarity.
Precisely. The source says we have to shift the focus from, how much money is enough, to the mechanics of it, how is value exchanged, when do you get paid, and what exactly is that payment for? Let's use the CV of Roos van der Jagt, or D-O Roos, to really illustrate this. Specifically, that huge, often painful gap between prestige and an actual paycheck.
Okay, because the achievements on this CV they're major.
Yeah.
This is undeniable artistic credibility. We're talking about being a finalist for a sculpture tribute to slavery victims for the Louvre.
And the French Ministère de la Culture, yeah. Between 2020 and 2021, that is peak institutional validation.
What does something like that get you?
It opens doors, it gets you high-level network access, serious reviews, makes you eligible for the biggest grants. Then you add things like exhibiting at the Oculus Gallery in New York in 2024 or the NASA Mars Film Project in 2018.
Or being named one of 100 photographers to watch.
These things are a kind of currency. It's the currency of credibility.
But, as we know, credibility doesn't pay the utilities. When you look further down that same CV, you see a different kind of work.
Exactly. Contrast the Louvre nomination with, say, an AI photography project she did for the Omgevingsdienst Noordziekenalgebied in 2024.
Which is what?
It's a regional environmental agency, a government body. Or look at a photography assignment she did for a law firm, Huthoff Buruma, back in 2015.
So, corporate and government work.
Highly skilled professional assignments, but they live outside that gallery world. These commissions are often the lifeblood. They're the concrete financial deals that support the practice, so that the artist can then afford to spend months of unpaid time on those high-prestige projects.
Which brings us right back to that illusion of compensation. The idea that visibility is still offered as a currency.
It's the oldest trade-off in the book. The source is very clear on this. You might mount a huge exhibition at a gallery, get massive prestige from it, but walk away with zero actual revenue.
You might even have to pay fees to participate.
Or the grant money you got barely covers the cost of materials, let alone your time. Look at her film, Tarot, from 2022. It's screened at the International Film Festival Rotterdam and the Cannes Short Film Corner.
I mean, that's top-tier exposure, the highest level of visibility you could ask for.
But in the short film world, the revenue streams are famously, let's just say they're delayed, or they just don't exist.
So the payment for showing at Cannes is status.
It's free, high-status marketing. But you can't pay your electric bill with status. You've traded your time and your money for prestige, and you're gambling that prestige will lead to a paying gig later on. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to talk about the cost of the process itself, all the structural labor that no one ever sees.
And this is where her podcast press kit comes in.
Yes. The podcast, which is called The Artist, is recorded in real time. It's literally her navigating the bureaucracy. You hear her writing the subsidy applications, dealing with rejections.
That sounds completely exhausting.
It's the definition of invisible labor. It isn't just making the art, it's translating this fluid creative vision into rigid institutional jargon for a grant application.
Right, turning a meditation on light into a measurable artifact meeting urban revitalization criteria.
Exactly. That constant negotiation is a huge energy drain.
So the precarity isn't just about money. It's about this negotiation fatigue, this constant state of application.
Absolutely. That energy drain is a massive, uncompensated cost of doing business. The source highlights that the whole system of rejection and repositioning, having to justify your existence again and again, is a kind of barrier.
Only the people with the most endurance can get through it.
The most endurance and often the most existing resources to fall back on. It's a psychological and an administrative burden.
So survival isn't about genius. It's this balancing act of access, timing, negotiation, and all the structural work.
And it means you're always recalibrating. Always. You can see it so clearly in her education history on the CV. She graduated from a top art school, the Willem de Kooning Academy. But then, much more recently, between 2022 and 2024, she's doing master modules in innovation management and business innovation.
Wow, that is a big shift later in a career. It feels like a signal that to stay in the game, you have to learn the language of institutions and the market.
You have to. You're learning business innovation right alongside contemporary art.
It's more of that structural labor.
And it directly addresses the constraints. You have to understand how a business model works, how grant finances are managed. If you want to secure your own resources, it means being an artist, an administrator, a strategist, and a writer all at once.
And we see that in her founding this. Seeking Earth Rising in 2020. What is that?
It's a nonprofit foundation. It's a platform she created for projects that, as the CV says, transcend the individual professional practice.
So it's bigger than just her own work.
Exactly. It's a long-term strategy. It's not about immediate income. It's about building a context, a community, and an infrastructure for her ideas. It lets her apply for different kinds of funding that an individual couldn't. This ability to build your own structures, that's often what separates the people who can survive the downturns from those who can't.
It's the scaffolding you have to build just to keep your art practice standing. And it's so important that we don't frame this as some kind of hustle culture or heroism.
We have to avoid that. The second you start romanticizing this grind at some kind of entrepreneurial test, You let the system off the hook.
You ignore the systemic failures that created the precarity in the first place.
Right. This is about structural limits. That's where the focus has to be.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. If you look at this whole trajectory, this constant recalibration, it means making a living isn't a number. It's not a destination you arrive at.
No.
It's the continuous adaptive process of just keeping the practice in motion. It's about surviving the reality of irregularity.
So, to summarize our deep dive here, we wanted clarity on what it means to live from your work. And I think we found it. It's not some moral judgment on your talent.
No.
It's a structural reality. It's defined by irregular pay, constant negotiation, and the fact that precarity has just been normalized by the very systems that are supposed to support culture.
And what's great about the sources is that they offer that clarity, but not some simple 5-step formula for success.
Yeah, because there isn't one.
The unresolved challenge is this constant need to translate your vision, your subjective artistic vision, into the rigid, measurable language that institutions require, especially when you're dependent on subsidies to survive.
That tension is always going to be there. How do you maintain your autonomy when you're dependent on a grant that, inevitably puts limits on what you can do? The endurance we see in that CV, that's the real fight. It's the fight against that dependency.
So what does this all mean?
It means that despite all the uncertainty, the work continues. You can see it in her plans for the future, like the Future Image Lab in 2026. So the question we're left with for you, the listener, is really this. Since we know the systems value prestige over direct financial support, how do you define sustainability on your own terms? That personal definition, that constant recalibration, that just might be the actual work.